Hello and welcome to this interview today with Jenny Glick, and I'm going to introduce her in detail in a moment. My name is Sigrid Kast, Sticky Big Marketing Consultant, and I work with coaches and consultants to write and publish a marketing-ready book in 6 weeks or less. And today I would like to have Jenny share her expertise. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist who's been guiding families, couples, and individuals over 20 years now into relationships and with themselves and others. So there's a lot more to it than what one is probably thinking initially what you do, Jenny. Welcome, and I'm really looking forward to having you give us an insight into the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Sigrid. It's such a pleasure to be here, and always a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about relationships in what I hope will be a new way, because we tend to come to thinking about relationships maybe a little bit like writing a book in a particular way. And if we keep coming at it in that particular way, we will likely get stuck and feel overwhelmed, and then don't actually move forward to make the change that we could make in our relationship. So
And is that something, Jenny, you think is dependent on the times that we are in, or is it to do with cultural living, the mixture of so many cultures these days in almost all countries? What is it down to that we have this, maybe you call it a boxed in thinking?
Well, it's a really great question. I think part of it is, in our world, people are so busy. And I should say, my 20 plus years experience has been pre-COVID, right? And currently as well. But I know life is a little bit different right now and stressful in a different way. But that sort of like busyness of marriage and children and work, and so thinking about how is it that my partner and I learn to communicate in a better way, figure out how to talk about sex or have a more satisfying sex life. It's like, I don't even know where to start. And we got to get the kids to soccer, and I have to finish this briefing, and I have to make dinner, and I don't even know how to start. And so I'm not going to. And then the typical ways of starting, I joke often with my clients that there's a stack of half-read self-help books on their nightstand, or they'll buy one and give it to their, partner and say, read this, and they don't. Or these, dabbling in couples counseling that can happen. And there's nothing wrong. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I worked in that traditional space for a very long time. And there can be an effective time and space for couples counseling as well. However, what I found was that so many couples would come to my office, and it was the only time that they were really talking about anything. So we'd have the 50-minute hour to get through 2 weeks worth of, anger, resentment, frustration, plus the 5 or 10 years prior to that, and which is not very much time, right? And then they would go back, leave our hour, and go back to doing the same old at home, right? And so I think there are so many reasons why we don't know where to start. We don't feel like we have the time. We try couples counseling and don't feel like we get anywhere, so we don't do it. And just that feeling of being overwhelmed. And so we just don't, and think it'll get better when the kids grow up, or maybe we'll just wait, and once the kids leave, then we can get a divorce, kind of a thing.
I think I think that happens a lot from people that I know and I have known over the last 30 years or so, that happens. They stay with it until they feel they are free to move on their own without ever exploring, could there be more to stay? And it is not the issue that other person, which sometimes happens, people think it's just the other person, and then they try it again and they try it again time and time, and still they don't succeed. So is it particularly couples that you focus on and work with, Jenny, or is it the individual? I saw somewhere in your material or on your website and we'll put the link of that into the comments. Is it individuals, as in women in particular?
Yeah, so I used to work with couples traditionally. That's what I'm trained to do. And what I found was usually one person was more motivated to engage in couples counseling than the other. So, which I would say was easily 80% of the couples who I worked with. One person, usually the wife, not always, was the one who would say, and that's in heterosexual couples. I worked with same sex couples as well. I tended to see in same sex couples, there was more mutual interest in them coming together. For most of my heterosexual couples, usually it was the woman calling, and the husband was coming with a little, the motivation on a 0 to 10 scale at like a 5. Her motivation was like a 9. And, the example I give is, it's like if you have that mismatch kind of motivation, right, from the get-go, getting to a particular goal together is a little bit of a challenge. Or if the goal is different, that the wife wants to go, I practiced in Denver. So I would say if the wife wants to go to New York and the husband wants to go to LA, this is a tough starting point to try to, get the both of you, right, to be lined up with each other, because there's so much resistance and pushing back. And, sometimes in couples counseling, one person could try to get me to be on their side, to say, well, he really shouldn't be doing that, or she shouldn't be, and a skilled couples therapist knows how to hold the space and at least from my perspective, help both people with their own personal development so that they can engage with one another from what I think of as the highest version of themselves, right? Because then they will be creating a higher version of their marriage. So what I found after doing that for years and years and years and years and years was it was a bit like herding cats, trying to get two people who were like, I'm showing up and my motivation's at a 2 and I'm pissed off and this isn't working. And it's like, well, right, if this is how we're showing up, it makes it really hard. And so now what I do is I work with one person and I focus on women. And women say to me, how come I'm the one who has to do the work? And I say, you don't have to, you get to. You get to grow, you get to develop, you get to become the highest version of yourself in this relationship. Or as you become that highest version of yourself, you might decide that you're complete with the relationship, which is a beautiful time to leave a relationship. Not when you're angry, not when you're resentful, not when you're blaming, but when you've done the kind of learning and growth that you need to do to leave that relationship from like, peace out, namaste, a place of a little bit more of your highest potential. And what I know from systems theory is when you have a couple, when one person decides to change, that system changes. It's like in your physical body, when you stop drinking alcohol or start drinking your 8 liters of water a day or whatever it is, your whole system changes. Your skin starts changing, your intestines start changing, like things start changing. And when I have one woman who commits to her change, and the problem in couples counseling is usually one person's committed only if this one is. Well, I'll do the homework if he does. Well, he didn't, so I'm not going to do mine, or she didn't. And so, right? And so the growth then is dependent on the other person. And when I work with one person, if she commits, she will get the change because the system changes. Does that make sense?
Totally. I see it, in relation to so many other things in life, what you're saying, it makes absolute sense. So does it happen often that the male will be the one who wants to do the change and come and work with you on his own, or is it really more the ladies, the female?
Yeah. I have had a couple of men say to me, why don't you create a men's program?
Yeah.
And I've said, I'm going to leave that to the men to create the men's program. So in my private practice, I did work with men, but in what I do now, because I don't like to use the word intensive, but it's an intensive 8-week experience and it's a women's space. And so we have all women, and we have some women who are in same-sex relationships with women, but it's a women's space. in order to keep it really dialed in to what it is that we're working on. So I don't work with men in this way.
No, I see. And I guess that motivation from female, it just seems to be there. Males have got a bit of a different approach. That's not to say either is right or wrong, but I think it's important to support the one that really wants to make the change. Isn't it? So your 8-week intensive is a very specific program you have developed. Is that correct, Jenny?
Yes, yeah. So I developed it, and it's 56 days. So I have you every day for 56 days. And in that time, what we're doing is we're helping you shift out of the identity that you've practiced, that identity of anger, of resentment, of frustration, of blaming, of feeling abandoned and hurt. Not that those things aren't true. I've been married 20 plus years, so I have hurt and, all anger and frustration like that comes up. And there's a difference between allowing the feelings to come up and feeling them and processing them. That's what I help teach women to do, as opposed to parking in that anger and then putting a narrative on top of that anger. This always happens. It's never going to change. I've known since we got married that this shouldn't be the person that I'm with. And then there's another emotion. And then there's a belief, I'm stuck. I can't get out, not until the kids get older. And that becomes this identity. And I talk about it like this is your 1.0 identity. And there are thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and behaviors in this 1.0 identity. And that's where most of us will live in our relationship, and we feel very stuck. And so if you pick up a self-help book from your 1.0 identity and you read something and it sounds really brilliant, but your 1.0 identity is going to be like, why do I have to do it? How come he doesn't? Because that's part of that identity. And so I help women craft their 2.0 identity, the part of them that actually can experience ease and calm and joy and receptivity and connection. But you have to learn to have thoughts and feelings and beliefs and an emotional state. You have to learn to be that first.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to practice that every single day. And so we have daily practices that the women are engaging in. And so I walk them between the 1.0 and the 2.0, and it feels like an ocean to cross, right?
Yeah,
but you have me and the community of women to get you there. But in this 2.0 place, your marriage looks very different, and you experience it very differently.
And that kind of reminds me of the saying that, you see what you want to see, or the words are a little bit different. And what happens to you is what you create with your thinking in a way, and with your actions and reactions to your environment. And I guess that is what happens very much and is played out a lot in a marriage when you are having to, really communicate, but you're not. A lot of things are left under the table. They never get touched on. So interestingly, at what point do women come to you, seek you out, and is there anything that they could really look at right now to say, yes, actually, the point is now, I need to get in touch with Jenny?
Great question. So I would say most women come to me when they feel like they've tried everything. I hear that a lot. I've tried everything and nothing has worked. So I tend to work with women who have, are very well resourced. They have a meditation practice, or at least know about meditation, and do yoga and read self-help books, and have had therapists, have tried couples therapy, maybe even gone on couples retreats, so they're a more sophisticated bunch because this isn't their first go around. But they recognize that they have all this information and it sounds amazing, but then they don't do anything with it. They don't do anything. They park in their 1.0, and they know that they should show up differently if they want things to be different. And they're not making it happen, and they don't know how. That's what they say. I just don't even know how to start. So that's usually when they call me. And I think I tend to work a little bit more with women who are in their 40s or 50s. You know, I actually just had a woman graduate who's been married 47 years. She's in her 60s. And
Wow.
she said, now is my time. I have been doing it the 1.0 way for 47 years, and I am not going to do it anymore. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, what a cool thing, right?
Mm.
Um, and so usually there's a knocking in their soul or heart where they're like, I want to have a more satisfying life.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I want to make sure I tried everything before I leave this relationship because our kids are now gone. You know, that's the situation for a lot of women. Or we have young kids, and I recognize that I'm not being the role model. I wouldn't want them to have this marriage, and it makes me sick that they're seeing my partner and I interact in the ways that we are with one another. So that's usually where they show up. And so for anyone who's listening, the thing to sort of ask yourself is, if you have kids, to ask yourself, is your relationship one that you want your children to emulate?
Wow. Wow.
And if it is, amazing. And if it's not, then that might indicate that taking some action could be useful.
Yes, yes. So it's all very well to try and do self-help, which often happens in many areas of our life where we're trying to do it ourselves. And there are a lot of self-help books out there on that sort of thing. We'll talk about a book in a moment, but the thing is that it's really getting that one-on-one interaction with a person who really knows how to guide us and bring it out, isn't it? And give that direction. And that is what you are doing. So to say nothing has worked, but I want to give it one more shot, that's sort of the point in time where they come to seek you out. Is there a particular way you reach out to women from your end?
So I have a newsletter, and I can share a link if any of your viewers would like to join that. I write 5 days a week a content-rich post about what I teach and what I do. I put it all out there. And I have women almost every day. I get a message or email from someone who I don't know, who's on my list or is a friend on Facebook or somewhere in social media land, who says, thank you so much. I get so much out of this, right? Because I'm teaching how it is that you you start crafting and practicing this 2.0 identity, even when, right? Even when you're in the middle of a pandemic, even when there's a job loss, or you have, you know, a newborn, or what, your husband's an alcoholic, you know, whatever it might be. And so I think the value, one of the many values of what I do, is I help it be operational and practical for women. Because if you don't know where to sink your teeth in, you can't start. So you need to know, you need to have somebody looking at your life going, okay, here's what I'm hearing you do the first 20 minutes of your day. And that's all 1.0 stuff. We're going to get you into 2.0, and I want you to do these things and then report back to me.
Yeah,
Right? So
yeah.
that kind of, you know, being held to get you there.
It's a bit like, sometimes I'm thinking of that image of, you know, holding the mirror up to you. You see yourself in one way, but really when that mirror is there and somebody points things out to you, you can actually then see the other angles, the other points that are there that you have, but you just don't know, is what I'm getting from that. Would that be a description?
Absolutely. And I think because this isn't just mindset work, you're applying it. We're getting it in your body, in your life. You know, part of the reason why I created this program was I spent a lot of time going to retreats and dragging my husband to couples retreats, and they were all great. But then we'd go back home to our life. And it's like we would leave, you know, the great Mexican beach behind us, you know, where it's all daiquiris and, you know, enjoyable. And so for me, I think of this as an 8-week at-home retreat where you're embodying and practicing this in your life. Because until it's mapped in your body, until you have those practices in your body, it's just something you're thinking about. And one of the women who graduated last week, she said to me, I was in therapy for 10 years trying to work this
Yeah.
out. And she said, I have it now. She's like, I can't believe how at ease I feel, how relaxed, how much happier I am. I'm sleeping at night. And this from a woman who works in a hospital, has 2 kids, is divorced, has a blended situation in her family. Her ex-husband's an alcoholic. She has a lot going on. And she's like, I have so much ease in my life because she practiced this
Mm-hmm.
for 8 weeks, right?
I think what happens with traditional ways of taking things, approaching things, our world changes so quickly. Not only that, we really are bringing together the world. So we're not in just little cultural nooks any longer. And through all of that, traditional ways don't always change with it. So your approach is taking what is required now, and from your own experience over time and working with clients, you can be much more flexible in approaching the subject and in working um, with the ladies who want this change. And I'm sure, like me too, when something comes through from the clients, you know instinctively almost to make an addition to the program, or ask questions differently. I'm sure I find that really interesting. Now, you mentioned that you have that newsletter and you're putting out posts and really going into detail. So the question is, how awesome would it be for a person to actually read it? Now, we said reading for instructions is not necessarily the way, but there are also books that can really create a conversation with the reader to get them thinking, hang on a minute, this is great, but this is not something just for me to do on my own. This is something I really need Jenny for. You've been thinking about writing, or people have asked you or told you to, which happens often. What's stopping you? What's the one big thing that would stop or has stopped you so far?
Well, what I tell myself, Sigrid, is that I don't know where to start,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if I have the time, but it would require me to shift my time. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the starting point, which is so interesting because it's why people, when they haven't had sex for a long time, the number one reason why they don't have sex, they keep not having sex, is they don't know where to start.
And then I don't know how to say, it's time for
Yeah,
me now.
it's time for me to do this. Let's make this happen, you know?
Incredible. So that. I guess that is a great point, which gives me some food for thought in my approach to sharing with expertise giving people like yourself. It is time to start anytime you want to, I guess, like when they decide to come and see you, because I can see that detailed and experienced knowledge for you to share, how valuable that would be. Yes, signing up to your newsletter, absolutely. We'll put that into the comments as well, a link for that. But obviously, to have it in a succinct form where you can go back over of it until you're ready to come and say and knock on your door and say, Jenny, please help me, I guess would be great too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So is
Yeah,
this something, sorry, go on.
well, it's something I've been thinking about doing for over a year. And it's just been knocking, knocking, knocking. And I know that that's not uncommon for people.
True.
And not because I want to be famous or have a New York Times bestselling book, but because I want what I do to be more accessible, because I know
Yes.
not everyone will decide to work with me in the way that I work, because it's does require something of an investment financially, of your time, of your
Yeah.
energy, and there is great value because I'm a voracious reader and I don't work with the authors, right? I read the books and they can transform my life if I apply the
Yes.
concepts. So I know that there's great value in that.
Fantastic. So what would you like to leave our listeners with? A thought, a direction, or a comment? What comes to mind for you at this point? from everything you've shared, very valuable to listen to.
Yeah. So I think whether you are coupled in a marriage or not, to really look at this premise that your relationship with your intimate partner, whether you're in relationship now or not, is a direct reflection of the relationship that you have with yourself, right? So when I use this analogy of the 1.0, usually women who show up with me, they're maybe critical of their partners, they have some judgment of their partners, and once we sort of get in there, what I learn is they're really hard on themselves. They push themselves really hard. They don't set boundaries with themselves for things like self-care. And self-care, I don't mean like manicures and pedicures, though that's fine. By self-care, I mean how it is that those thoughts that you have in your mind, where you say things like, oh, that was so dumb, I can't believe that I did that. Or like how we can terrorize ourselves with anxiety, with fear, with worry, right? It's really important to take that lens and look at yourself, because your external relationship is going to be a mirror of this relationship, right? So in the work that I do, I help you align this relationship to be in that 2.0 version. And what happens then is then this relationship shifts as well. So look at the kind of relationship you have with yourself. And if you love it, if you are in love with yourself, if you're kind to yourself, if you if this is all good, then awesome. If you're hard on yourself, if you beat yourself up, if you don't celebrate yourself, if you don't say no to people so that you can have time for your yoga practice or your self-care practice, then it may be time for you to do some of that up-leveling in order to change the relationships.
So get something for yourself. It is time to create that 2.0 of you. Jenny Glick, I really appreciate talking to you, for you to share the details. Jenny Glick is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist, and she works with you intensively for 8 weeks. Thank you for your time, and we will put details to contact you directly below this interview. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Sigrid. I appreciate it.